Welcome back to the Deep Dive, and just a quick note, this information is presented by Bluewater Auto Restoration.
Great to be back.
If you're joining us for the first time, or if you're a longtime listener, you already know this is week 51 of the 2025 Bluewater Auto Restoration Deep Dive. We drop these every Saturday morning.
And today we are tackling, well, a subject that's pretty much unavoidable if you get into large, complex physical projects, and that is failure.
Failure.
Specifically, we're digging into the anatomy of projects that just stall out or die on the vine or, frankly, collapse under their own weight.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Our subject today is the anatomy of a failed build, what went wrong, and how to recover. Now, we are zeroing in on custom car restorations because, honestly, they're fantastic petri dishes for watching project failure unfold.
They really are.
But I want to be really clear here. If you have ever started a massive home renovation, maybe launched a small business, or even just tried to write a novel, anything that demands serious long-term resources, patience, momentum, you are absolutely going to see yourself reflected in this deep dive.
Yeah, the patterns are universal.
We're basically taking that raw, sometimes painful experience of project failure and turning it into quantifiable, usable knowledge, stuff you can actually use.
And our mission here, it's purely clinical and, well, prescriptive.
Mm-hmm.
We need to examine precisely why these restoration projects fail. And it's usually a mix, right? Financial, mechanical, and maybe most commonly emotional breakdowns.
Right.
Then the critical part. We have to outline the precise, actionable strategies you need to diagnose that failure, stabilize the project, and, fingers crossed, successfully restart it.
It's like a checklist and a rescue plan rolled into one.
Exactly. Think of this as your essential pre-flight checklist and your emergency revival manual. We are basically providing a shortcut to spotting those catastrophic warning signs early and, crucially, rebuilding smarter this time, not just, harder.
Okay, so to really grasp how important this conversation is, we have to start with some data. What's the reality check we need to face about actually finishing these things?
Yeah, the reality is, well, it's a bit tough, but it's necessary. Industry data consistently shows that somewhere between 35 and 40% of amateur restorations stall permanently before they ever reach completion.
Wow, 35 to 40%, that's significant.
It is, and that number, it represents countless hours, huge financial investments, and literally thousands of personal dreams just frozen in time, gathering dust in garages everywhere.
So failure isn't the exception, it's almost a common stage.
That high rate of attrition really confirms that failure isn't some rare anomaly. It's arguably the most common phase of the whole project cycle for amateurs. Understanding this failure mechanism is, I'd argue, maybe even more important than understanding the assembly process itself sometimes.
40%. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay, so that means for every, 2 finished projects you admire at a car show, there's probably at least one more sitting somewhere, unfinished, just waiting for rescue.
That's about the ratio, yeah. It's a huge risk zone.
Which underscores why this planning discussion is so vital. All right, listeners, as we dive into the nitty-gritty, remember you can always visit our sponsor for more resources on making your own restoration a success. That's BlueWaterAutoRestoration.com. Okay, let's start with the basics. Terminology. We throw around the term failed build pretty casually, but what's the strict, maybe quantifiable definition? How do you know if a project's gone past just a simple pause and into, genuine failure territory?
That's a really essential distinction to make. Look, a stalled project is one that's paused for a clear, logical reason. Maybe you're waiting on a specialist for engine machine work, something like that. It's normal.
Right. Temporary holdup.
Exactly. A failed build, on the other hand, we define that as a project that has lost its internal capacity for completion. It stalls out indefinitely, it loses all direction, or it becomes truly unfinishable because there's been a fundamental breakdown in planning or skill set or resources.
And the mindset shifts too, right?
Crucially, yes. The owner's mental state shifts from being this optimistic builder to feeling like a burdened caretaker of a pile of parts. That's a key psychological shift.
Okay, so how can someone listening right now objectively figure out if their project has crossed that invisible line? We need some metrics, something beyond just feeling bummed out about it.
We can actually use 5 key indicators. These are basically project management principles, but applied right there in the garage. Pretty concrete things to look for.
All right, let's hear them.
First up, the clock. Simple but effective. We've generally established 6 months as the standard cutoff. If that project sits completely untouched, I mean, zero progress for 6 or more consecutive months.
6 months is a long time in project land.
It really is. That's a critical failure of momentum, and it usually signals there's a deeper, unresolved psychological or maybe financial blockage. The tools get put away, dust settles literally and figuratively, and restarting requires a huge amount of activation energy.
Makes sense. What's number 2?
Number 2, the wallet. This one hurts. If the costs blow past 125% of the original detailed line item budget, and I really have to stress the detailed budget part, not just some number scribbled on a napkin.
And the napkin budget doesn't count.
Definitely not. If you're over 125%, you are officially in financial failure territory. That extra 25% margin, that kind of accounts for minor surprises, the little things. Anything past that strongly suggests systemic budgeting errors or just totally uncontrolled scope creep.
Okay, clock, wallet. What's third?
Third is the mental state. Now, this one's a bit subjective, sure, but it's incredibly reliable. It's that point when the sheer frustration of just looking at the vehicle or dealing with part suppliers again, or maybe attempting rework for the third time, when that frustration significantly, consistently outweighs any enjoyment you get from the process itself.
Oh yeah, when it feels more like homework or a chore than a hobby.
That's exactly it. If the car feels like homework, that's a clear sign of psychological failure setting in.
That one's going to hit home for anyone who spent like 40 hours block sanding a fender, only to find a tiny crack in the filler and realize they had to strip it all off again.
Precisely. That labor stops feeling rewarding and starts feeling punitive. Okay, fourth indicator, the mechanics. This is the hard, sometimes terminal problem. We're talking about discovering an unrepairable design flaw or some major mechanical issue that got introduced mid-build.
Like what, specifically?
Could be finding major structural rust or frame damage that's way beyond your repair skills or budget. Or maybe fundamentally incompatible components were forced together, creating an engine or drivetrain that just cannot physically operate safely or reliably without massive, costly re-engineering. It's a dead end, mechanically.
Right, a point of no return, technically. And the fifth indicator?
The fifth one, and this kind of ties all the others together, is the documentation collapse. This happens when you lose track of the parts inventory, you stop updating any kind of timeline or plan, or you genuinely can no longer easily identify which bits go with which subassembly.
The box of mystery bolts problem.
Exactly. You've lost the project's institutional memory. If you don't know what you have or where it goes, you simply cannot finish the job efficiently. Maybe not at all. The confusion becomes overwhelming.
I really appreciate that breakdown because it gives listeners something concrete to measure against. Now, you mentioned failure is rarely just one thing, right? It's usually a pileup. That's why your categorization into different modes of failure is so important.
That's right. And understanding the specific failure mode is critical because it dictates the recovery strategy. So we categorize them into a few distinct types.
Yep.
We start with the hard failures. These are the tangible, concrete causes. First is financial failure. Just a total budget collapse, often triggered by massively underestimating materials costs or specialized labor, or, as we'll discuss, hidden repairs.
Right, money runs out.
Plain and simple. Then there are technical failures. This is the direct result of poor workmanship, maybe using the wrong tools improperly or forcing incompatible components together. The result is a loss of structural or mechanical integrity. Stuff is just built wrong.
And then there are the sneakier ones, the soft failures. You said these are often the real project killers.
Absolutely. The soft failures are insidious because they creep up on you. This includes management failure, basically, the complete absence of a structured plan, no timeline, no clear milestones, no prioritization. This inevitably leads to extreme timeline drift and that silent killer we mentioned, scope creep.
Where the project just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Exactly. It constantly evolves way beyond its initial intended goal, and that sinks budgets and timelines fast. Then, perhaps the most critical soft failure, psychological failure.
Burnout.
Burnout is a big part of it, yeah. Often caused by that sustained, grinding effort on repetitive, non-glamorous tasks. But it also includes what we call perfectionism paralysis.
Wanting it too perfect.
Precisely, where the desire for some unattainable show car standard in a home garage actually prevents any completion because nothing ever feels good enough. You get stuck.
You can really see how those soft failures intersect, can't you? Like, bad management lets the project drag on for years, which then almost guarantees psychological burnout.
Exactly. They absolutely feed each other. A poorly managed project is almost destined for burnout. And finally, just to be complete, we have to acknowledge the external failures.
Stuff you can't control.
Right. Causes largely outside the builder's direct control. Could be a major disruptive life event, a job loss, health issue, family changes. It could be the loss of a suitable workspace. Maybe you have to move suddenly and the car's in a million pieces. Or, critically for older cars, essential legacy parts becoming completely and permanently unavailable. Market changes, companies go bust, the part just doesn't exist anymore. Recognizing which category or categories your failure falls into is honestly the very first step toward figuring out how to recover. A financial failure needs a budget fix. A psychological failure needs a motivation reset. Different problems, different solutions.
Okay, so if that's how we define failure, let's go a bit deeper into the diagnosis. When we analyze all the data on these stalled projects, what are the absolute #1 primary root causes that keep showing up? My gut feeling is most failures probably start way back in the planning phase, not when the wrench is actually turning.
Your gut feeling is spot on, entirely accurate. The vast majority of project failures, we're talking somewhere around 80%, can be traced directly back to poor upfront management. It's rarely just a lack of mechanical skill.
So the skills gap only becomes fatal when the planning is bad.
Exactly. Bad planning makes a skills gap lethal to the project. So the #1 culprit, always, 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 is planning. Or rather, the lack of it, the failure to define clear, measurable goals right from the very beginning.
Right, you start with this vague idea like restore a classic truck. But what does that actually mean? Driver quality, concours winner, full rest-a-mod with an LS swap.
Precisely. Without those clearly defined roles, you are basically inviting scope creep to dinner. And scope creep is the silent assassin of projects. The original direction gets lost, and every single time the scope expands, oh, let's add air conditioning, or you know what, let's ditch the stock engine for a modern EFI setup. Every time you multiply the budget and the timeline, often exponentially.
And each time you add scope, you're essentially tearing up the original financial plan you made, if you even made one.
Which leads us directly to the second major root cause: budgeting. People consistently, almost universally, underestimate two critical things: the cost of specialized labor they might need, and the impact of hidden costs.